Okay, good evening. It is 5:30. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And to remind everybody, please turn your phones to silent or turn them down. And if you join us, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Chris, would you take the roll, please?
Councilmember Stevens?
Here.
Councilmember Strebe?
Here.
Councilmember Berg? Councilmember Rowe?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dalby.
Here.
Items on the consent agenda. Minutes from regular meeting number 27 on October 1st, 2019, and special meeting number 28 on October 8th, 2019, as presented. Approve the appointment of Brad Serter to the position of Engineering Design Tech 1 position effective October 21st, 2019. Resolution number 223, 2019, setting November 5th, 2019 as the date of a public hearing on the disposition of city-owned property located at 216 North Marion to John and Noma Wodenberg. Resolution number 226, 2019, setting November 22nd, 2019 as the time and place for receipt of proposals and development agreements for the renovation of 203 East Main, 116 South Market, and setting December 3rd, 2019 as a public hearing on the intent to dispose of real property located at 203 East Main, 116 South Market. Resolution number 229, 2019, authorizing the purchase of 6 sets of turnout gear for $11,957.25 from Sandry Fire Supply for the Fire Department. Resolution number 230, 2019, authorizing the purchase of 32 winter parkas for $7,542.40 from Galls Incorporated for the Fire Department. Resolution number 233, 2019, approving the contract bond and certificate of insurance for the 2020 roofing improvements rebid project. Resolution number 234, 2019, approving the contract bond and certificate of insurance for the Beach Phase 4 shade structures installation project. Resolution number 237, 2019, approve the purchase of a 2019 Dodge Ram 1500 crew cab and the amount of $24,306 from Stu Hansen Dodge for the sewer department. Resolution number 238, 2019, approve the purchase of a ProTech snow pusher and the amount of $4,360.50 from Martin Equipment for the Public Works Department.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda with tabling of item B7.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby.
Yes. Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby.
Yes. Okay, that leads us on down to the administrator's report. And at this time, we have 4 items. I'll turn it over to Administrator Lazio.
Thank you, Mayor Delby. I put in your packet a summary of some activity. Last week, Mayor Pro Tem Matt Delby and I met with Mr. Keck and reviewed some operational expenses for the FBO at the airport. I've given you a memo that was prepared and not shared earlier this year. And so after considering the situation at the airport, I am recommending to the council that we forego the rent for the FBO in the name of Archangel for the entire year of 2019. That amounts to a total of $9,400. And I think if you have some questions after you looked at the memo, I'd be glad to respond to anything, but I think it's the right thing to do and to keep our FBO solvent. And as you know, they have not been able to fly since we closed the airport back in April due to the reconstruction. And that was our decision. They had no choice in the matter. So I feel like we need to accommodate them. And as I've talked to other FBO operators, their councils do provide some support, financial incentive to the operation. So that's my recommendation. I'd be glad to respond to any questions you might have. And Matt, you were there too. You could add anything you want?
Yeah, it was a good meeting, and I just reiterated in the meeting that as a business where we inhibit a person from conducting business, that falls on our lap. We need to do something to make sure that the damage there is kept to a minimum. And on the other hand, if it's up to the business, that's their deal. So this truly is an issue, and I think we had a good meeting with Tom. We both felt that this truly was a deal where we had shut the airport down for a good reason, but that does impact the airport's ability to make revenue. And so it was a good meeting, and I think Mr. Keck was obliging with that and good with it. So yeah, that's all I have on that.
Joni, do you want to make some comments?
Would you like me to prepare a staff summary and resolution for the next meeting
That would be
and bring it
fine.
before council for a vote?
That'd be fine. Next on the agenda, we have a CBDB update from Andy Wartenberg. So I'd ask Andy to come to the podium and tell us what he's got on mind.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just want to give you a brief update on some of our CVB activities. Go ahead, go next slide, please. Really, our major focus in the last couple of months has been on groups and more groups. And some of the things we've been doing to try and attract group business is really changing the way we're responding to RFPs. If you look over on the right-hand side, we don't do two-page RFPs anymore. We do RFPs which are visually better than some of our big guy competitors. And we've been doing partnerships, be it with Legacy, Area 15, things like that. Also, we are in production of a group sales video. This video is going to be focused exclusively on why you're going to bring a group to Ottumwa. We actually started filming yesterday. We should have that done probably in about 3 months. Third, we have been partnering with the Bridgeview Center on digital advertising, some good economies of scale. If you look on your left there, that is some advertising that's currently running in meetingpages.com, which goes out to about 5,000 meeting planners. Fourth, we've now developed digital welcome packs for anyone who's coming here. Instead of just handing them a bag, which we still do, they get everything online before they actually get here. And we are planning a meeting planner fam trip for next year. And this is just some of the marketing material that will go in the digital pack, our visitor guide, our press kit, restaurant guide, and of course, our video once it's done. And the video, of course, will be shared with the city, with GoPip partners, with Legacy. So I'm very, very happy to say that this slide is getting fuller and fuller. These are some of the conferences we've been bidding on that we've won. Professional Developers of Iowa 2020, American Planners Association 2021, Babe Ruth 2021, Iowa Motion Pictures Association 2020. Diocese of Davenport was just here. They're coming back in 21. We're bidding on the Who Tractor Wide. We're on the short list for IAWEA. So, we just got to keep that pipeline full. We've got some really, really good conferences coming up, and hopefully that'll continue. We continue, of course, our digital marketing campaign with our email blasts. On the left is our events, which goes out bi-weekly. On the alternate weeks, we have our sales support. I do hope if anyone is not following us, just get on our website, and it's very easy to follow us right there. And of course, Facebook event sales promotions. And what we've done this year is we just finished our third of 4 Instagram campaigns. We just finished our signature dish restaurant. We work with Main Street and Travel Iowa. Basically, each day we feature a different locally owned restaurant here in Ottumwa. And you can see we have 55 new followers and like 6,100 engagements. But really what's been great about this is we had to go out and actually talk to every restaurant. And hopefully people in the business community, excuse me, are a little more aware of what the CVB can do for them. And we will have our holiday campaign coming out November 25th. Event support, as you all know, We actually counted, in 2018, we provided marketing sales support for about 250 events. And you can see balloon races, Oktoberfest, pages for pennies. Now that, that includes our marketing partnerships. You can see the events that we've actually provided advertising dollars for. And of course, if you go to the next slide, we do have our economic impact models. I just finished one for Halloween-a-Palooza. I don't have the final numbers, but I can tell you that the numbers look really good. About 30% of the attendees were out of town. The economic impact was well over $15,000. So, and again, all these statements that we're doing, they are available if anybody's interested in finding out exactly how good an event is doing for us. So, and this, of course, is just some of the results from Major League Eating last June. Also, next week, starting on Monday, we will be hosting 6 travel writers and bloggers from throughout the Midwest. That includes writers from Nebraska, from Missouri, from Illinois, from Minnesota, and Indiana. And basically, I am going to be their mother, their friend for 2.5 days, and I'm going to show them everything about Ottumwa. This is how we get our word out right here. We want to have 6 of the best virtual advocates in the Midwest out there talking about Ottumwa. And by the way, we do have a meeting scheduled with the city at 11:45 on Tuesday in 108. I think I did send everyone an email to meet the writers. So hopefully a couple of you or some of you can join us for that. Also, we've been doing some work with the Video Game Hall of Fame Museum. As I've said earlier, our ultimate goal is to have a signature event here. We just finished the Where's Walter promotion, where we place cutouts of Walter Day in businesses. This month, we'll be starting a video game trail. We'll actually be placing video games in businesses throughout town. And that'll do 2 things: help people engage with our businesses and also give us something else to sell, something to capitalize on that heritage right there. And again, our ultimate goal here is to have that signature video game event right here. But, the good thing is, I think a lot of people working with me will agree, we finally think we have everyone working on the same page right now. And hopefully, we can keep that momentum going. And lastly, I talked before about regional marketing. We do have a new marketing initiative we're working on with my colleagues in Pella and Oskaloosa. It's called the Iowa Harvest and History Getaway. You can see the dates right there. What's going to happen is it's going to be a 3-day event, and each day will focus a different community, and this will be promoted in major Midwest markets. So we're working on that for next October. So finally, how are we doing? I took a look. This is public knowledge. I'm sure most of you have seen this from Iowa Economic Development. You can see in 2018, our distribution was 449,556. 2018, we were up about 8%. And to give you an idea of how some of our friends are doing around the state, Des Moines had a very, very good year. Some places had good years, some places did not. So I think we're doing pretty good, but I would like to see that number go up over $500,000 right there. So that's what I got. So I'll take any questions if you have any.
Go ahead, Mark.
I don't really have a question. You've been here, what, a year now? A little
A
over?
year and 3 months-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
The amount of progress that you've made for CVB in that short amount of time is just amazing. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Councilman.
One of the things that I've been following in particular is the Instagram.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that is just wonderful.
Right.
It's actually given me a chance to go out to a few new places to eat that I didn't
Right.
necessarily
Well-
know about. So hopefully more people take advantage of looking at that particular social media and get some business for some of the restaurants here in town.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Councilman. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Eddie. Next on our reports, we have Tim Richmond, who's our Emergency Management Coordinator, and he's going to give us a brief summary of hazard mitigation. So he sent you a handout in your packet, so you should have that. Tim, good evening.
Thank you. And the challenge was to keep it at 5 minutes. We'll see how I do. As I've explained in previous meetings, one of the core missions of emergency management is to reduce the impact of disaster to our community and our families. And I spent a lot of time in the office developing and working with different segments of our community to develop emergency operation plans. But another segment of planning is hazard mitigation. And as in medicine, the best medicine is preventive medicine, and that's kind of what hazard mitigation planning is. For every dollar we spend from hazard mitigation, we save $4 in a response. And Ottumwa has a long history of doing fairly well with those types of projects, as Larry can attest. And of course, we come by that through hard lessons from floods and other natural disaster impacts. So a little bit about hazard mitigation planning, kind of how we've done it in the past. Not necessarily a required activity, unless, of course, you want some state and federal funds, and then it is. That's basically our ticket to those opportunities. And a plan has to be filed with FEMA every 5 years. And in the past, we've been through a process where we apply for hazard mitigation funds to do the process, develop the plans, and submit them. And the process is lengthy, it's burdensome, it's not fun, nobody really enjoys it, and the participation is varying. So this go around, I proposed an idea to the commission to say, why do we put ourselves through such pain? And a lot of the grant and the process to please that grant is feeding the grant instead of doing the work. So the proposal was to do something totally different and take a different approach to it. Rather than develop this plan and certify it and put it on the shelf and not look at it for 5 years, which is not uncommon, the proposal was to do an annual process where we survey all of our elected officials and our public with a set of questions and keep this conversation an annual one. And hopefully we get a cadence where we do it just ahead of budget time. So if there's some things on our mind that we want to tackle or look at, it would be very timely. So that's the approach we're going to take. We're not going to apply for those federal hazard mitigation funds because those funds are simply spent to please the grant requirements. So there's a partnership that was developed between Regional Planning Commission and the Emergency Management Commission to do just this. And it just makes sense to me because that's the mission of the Regional Planning Commission, is to do these types of things. So we're doing this together to hopefully produce a better product. And at the end of the day, the net cost of the taxpayer is exactly the same as it was out of pocket prior. Just a lot less hoops to go through, a lot less pain, a more straightforward, simple process. So what you received in your email from the clerk and in your packets for tonight was that survey and a one-page kind of brief summary of what I just described. And I encourage you, if there's questions or you want more in-depth engaged conversation with me, to reach out and we can have that. Otherwise, my ask is that as everybody take a look at those surveys and get them back to me by the end of the month so we can get those regional planning and start compiling all the jurisdictions. And this is a multi-jurisdictional plan, so it's all the municipalities, the county, and all the school districts that participate in this planning process. And really, it's just painting a map and getting ideas and projects and needs on the radar so that we can pursue funding opportunities or just work them into normal plans as funds are available. If these types of things aren't in this plan, then there's no eligibility to apply for grants to pursue them. So it's really important that we give it some careful thought, and if it's an inkling in your mind, to get that included. And we're going to plan on doing this survey annually. The questions may or may not be the same from year to year, depending on what kind of we gather. We'll look at some of the past responses. We'll look at past projects that are completed and ones that aren't completed, and put all that together for you. Really leaning on everybody in this room to give me their empirical knowledge of what you know from the lessons we've learned in the past and what you know about how natural disasters impact us. And this is really the focus, is natural disasters. There's many different threats and hazards we can mitigate for, but we're going to focus on what Mother Nature does because that's what usually costs us the most money. That, in a nutshell, is our new hazard mitigation planning process. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Tim? Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Our last item on the agenda is the presentation by Larry Seals, Director of Public Works, about our streets. We seem to get a lot of comments, both email, phone calls about streets, and our community, and after the winter we went through, thought it'd be helpful to review. Larry's given this presentation before, but how do we select and what's the cost of doing street work in our community? So, good evening, Larry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We put together a little presentation to kind of cover the common question that we receive from the citizens of how do you select which streets deserve or end up with funding. Just going to kind of read through this. We put a lot of background in. It's more for the general public, some facts about the city. The city comprises of approximately 16 and a half square miles. We got about 320 lane miles of hard surface road, about 53 miles of improved or unimproved alleys, 158 miles of sanitary sewer, 76 miles of storm sewer, 3,700 manholes, and about 3,700 intakes. The city runs an approximate budget of $60 million. The heavy burden upon the city to support the EPA mandate sewer separation work sets a compliance schedule. Completion date was set at 2036, which was a 25-year schedule from the time we started. At that time, the estimate was about $160 million for separation work. To date, the city has spent approximately $68 million. Street reconstruction, resurfacing budgets. The road use, we've used approximately $850 for outside contracting, lost somewhere around $1.2 million. And then we listed 3 years of CIP, ranging just depending on the amount of projects that year. The goals of the selection process is to preserve and or improve the overall condition of the city streets, to prove the best street condition for the largest number of drivers, to reduce the maintenance cost, and to use an objective and repeatable process to coordinate street improvement in an effective manner. The city runs on an annual budget of approximately $60 million, kind of a repeat. And then we tried to put together, depending on which street and what project is going on adjacent to it. So I'll just kind of read more for the general public. The Department of Public Works considers a number of factors when determining the highest priority street for reconstruction or resurfacing. The first two important factors are the remaining service life and the traffic volume, or the average daily traffic of the street. To maximize the benefits of the paving program, the city prioritizes the streets with the lowest remaining service life and the highest average daily count. We utilize two standard methods. We first review the Iowa Pavement Management Program, which uses an accurate past and projected pavement condition to optimize the cost-effective decisions on the roadway maintenance. And then we had an attachment that I'll provide to you. This information, along with visual inspections, are used when selecting the streets. We take into account recently completed work and future work, including municipal and utility work. We then overlay our current federally mandated 25-year compliance schedule for areas of future known separation. In these areas, the streets are deferred until the area is in design stages. There are times that we have to come in. Jefferson's probably a perfect example where we have to do street work. So we pre-separate, design it to where we can pick it up when the separation project comes through. That's just part of the process. We've done that on multiple locations throughout town. As part of the detailed assessment process, we review the condition of the sanitary sewer to determine if the rehabilitation or replacement is required. This step dictates if resurfacing is possible or complete replacement is required. I got ahead of myself. We then review water main break history and coordinate with Ottumwa Water and Hydro for main replacement consideration. If the design will allow, we locate new mains outside the pavement area. I think we all know what happens if we do have a main break and potential damage that could be caused. We then review all the funding options to determine funding levels for each street classification. One important factor to note is each funding source has specific uses and can be used on specific project types or street classifications. An example would be the statewide transportation improvement program, which we use on minor arterial streets. A couple examples: up and coming Milner Street is one of those that'll be funded. Main Street, Jeff Devine, was just in the process, it was funded with the majority from that funding source. Then there's the traffic safety transportation improvement program used, for example, like on the roundabouts. Once needs are determined and funding options identified, we review if grant funds are options. Street replacement project schedules can be dependent on grant awards and have been delayed to be in a position to receive those funds. One that I can think of off the top of the head would be for Market Street Bridge. We actually had that program for about 8 years before we successfully received state fundings, which was about $1 million. We received the limit. Other outside factors that have to be considered are plans from community organizations, such as Main Street, Iowa, or Legacy Foundation. Often these plans include infrastructure that the city would participate in funding. As with most municipalities, our infrastructure needs far exceed our revenue sources. At the end of this, we finalize the street project list with estimates and submit for council for selection. And then we just kind of put it in just a flow chart type where, again, it's just a repeat, but it's probably clearer to understand. The first thing we look at is our separation or 25-year compliance, sewer main condition, water main condition, street classification, that goes to funding, traffic volumes, again, we're trying to benefit the most citizens. Type of traffic, we also include pedestrians, trails, bikes, auto, heavy truck, existing street surface types, and then the rest of it is, I'll let you guys read it. In a 5-year period, 2014 to 2018, we've done 23.1 lane miles of streets and have been either reconstructed or resurfaced. If you go back in a 10-year period, we've done 59.2 lane miles. Same thing, either reconstructed or overlaid for a total cost of $28.1 million. And then we actually track back from 95 to 2018, or a 24-year period. We've done 116.3 lane miles of street, which is, again, either reconstructed or resurfaced at a cost of $41 million. In-house projects, we've done 52.4 lane miles at a cost of about $6 million. And then it just goes through the definitions of full width reconstruction, surfacing. I would entertain any questions.
Okay, is there any questions for Larry? Larry, I want to personally thank you for doing this presentation, because this is something that we struggle with for years, and all of us here, including the staff and elected officials, get hammered on is fix our streets, fix our streets. And there's nothing more that we want to do than fix all our streets. But like you said, most municipalities, there's more, infrastructure issues than there is revenue. And traveling around, and I think the mayor could attest to this too, we go to different League of Cities meetings and, different meetings associated with the position here. And there's not a whole lot of towns that don't have these same issues. And I think it's localized here because we live here, and we think it's a lot worse than it really is. But all communities struggle with this. So I was glad you pointed that out, how much we actually have to do, and that there is a plan behind it. There is a method to the madness. It isn't just picking streets out that we think need to be replaced. You have to keep all that in line with sewer separation, utilities replacement, and projects. And so that's a whale of a job to try to keep all that straight. So I think you've done a great job with it, and appreciate the presentation on it.
Well, one thing that also has to be kept in mind is once we do have a street plan, a lot of times those are changed by outside forces. We have sewer main collapses, we have water main breaks, we might have a business come in. Again, we have one financial pie to split among all the projects, and typically we have to reallocate, which means, to add a project, we're going to delay a project. That's constantly going on throughout the year. It's just part of the process. If something comes available, it's an 80-20 grant, of course, we're going to take advantage of it. It just extends our dollars that much further. So that makes it really hard to put a list together and say, this shall be done on that date. Well, no, it's going to change.
Certainly. Is there anything else for Larry? Okay. Administrator Lazio, are you done with the section there? Or?
I'm done with my section, thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll move on down to item E. Thanks a lot, Larry. This is the point in the meeting where we identify citizens who want to speak to an agenda item. If you do, as we go along, find a card there on the rail, and if you give it to one of the staff members, they will make sure to get it to the city clerk, and then we'll call you up when that item comes up. All right, moving on down to departmental recommendations.
Approve the agreement between the City of Ottumwa and Allender Butsky Engineers Incorporated for geotechnical engineering services in connection with CSO Phase 8, Division 1, Blake's Branch Sewer Separation Project. Recommendation: approve the agreement with Allender Butsky Engineers Incorporated and authorize the mayor pro tem to sign.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay. Once again, Larry, you have the floor.
This agreement will provide for geotech engineering services for Phase 8, Division 1 of the sewer separation project. The service will include 7 bore locations, will vary in depth from 15 to 25 feet. The bore logs will be used to identify soil types, water table, and if we encounter rock elevation levels. The information will be provided in the plan sets and used to determine bid items. This type of project is a moving operation and anticipated that a single lane closure will be required. The city traffic department crews will provide necessary traffic control. I think 4 of these bores will be on Main Street, so we will do some lane closures there, and then several are by the railroad tracks and on private property.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments for Larry on this item? Okay, seeing none. Chris, take the roll, please.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Requesting authorization to increase the Ottumwa Police Department's fleet of vehicles and accept the transfer of 3 forfeited vehicles from the Southeast Iowa Interagency Drug Task Force. Recommendation: authorize the Ottumwa Police Department to increase their fleet of vehicles and accept the transfer of 3 forfeited vehicles from the Southeast Iowa Interagency Drug Task Force.
Okay, and is there a motion on this item?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Chief McAndrew, you have the
Good
floor.
evening, Mayor and Council. These 3 vehicles will be used in daily operations by the Ottumwa Police Department's Investigations Unit and members of the Southeast Iowa Drug Task Force. The only cost to the city will be insurance and day-to-day maintenance. The Southeast Iowa Interagency Drug Task Force Executive Board approved the transfer of these 3 forfeited vehicles to the police department.
Okay, any questions for the chief? Okay, Chris, please take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, chief.
Presentation on water pollution control facility change of operations and effect on capacity. Recommendation: provide a presentation and update the city council members on water pollution control facility change of operations and the effect on capacity.
Okay, Larry.
Review the operational cost difference between operating the Ottumwa Water Pollution Control Facility and ammonia nitrification process and the design BOD removal process, and compare the plant capacity and the process efficiency. I have 2 individuals here that will be given the bulk of the presentation. We have our environmental engineer. If you guys want to come on up, we'll get started. Brian Bakke with HDR, and Phil, of course, with city staff, will be doing the actual energy savings that we actually encountered. I'm just going to hand it over now.
Sure. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you very much. I have a short presentation. I'm going to kick this off and provide an update of current activities, and then Phil's going to add at the end. This effort started about 2 years ago. I don't know if all of you were here when this effort started, but basically it spun out of a desire for the city to look at how much capacity was available at the water pollution control plant, and were there things that could be done at the plant to increase that capacity and make it available for economic growth. So that was about 2 years ago. We're providing an update tonight on ongoing activities since that time frame. So my outline, real brief, is to provide a background of kind of how it all started and some of the initial study and recommendations. Review the capacity evaluation that was done at that time. We then transitioned into kind of a full-scale pilot of changing the operation at water pollution control plant, and then looking at about 13 months of that full-scale pilot, looking at the results and the lessons learned. I'm going to provide some of those lessons learned, and then Phil's going to build upon that with some of the economics. So the background, for those of you that aren't familiar with the water pollution control plant, it's a secondary treatment facility consisting of various processes that do different things to treat the wastewater. We have primary screens and grit removal to remove rags and coarse material that can damage downstream pumps from the wastewater. We go through primary clarification, which provides settling of the settlable solids and the floating material in the wastewater. Then we go through the meat of the plant, which is called the vertical loop reactor. This reactor is an activated sludge process that aerates the wastewater, puts it in contact with microorganisms to basically oxidize the organics that are in there and potentially reduce the ammonia and ammonia levels prior to discharge. We then settle all of that bacteria that we grow out in final clarifiers and then disinfect it with UV light, which is a good disinfectant, and this prevents any sort of pathogenic material from making it to the river. The solids that are generated in all those processes are digested either in aerobic digestion tanks or in anaerobic digestion tanks. The facility has both, one for each type of sludge, and then that's land applied on farm ground. So this is how the plant kind of lays out from an aerial perspective. We have the headworks where the screening and grit and pumping take place, primary clarifiers, vertical loop reactors are directly to the south of there, final clarifiers where we settle those solids, and then anaerobic digestion for the primary sludge, solids contact tanks for the aerobic sludge, and so forth. So all in all, here, the trickling filters that were there previously have been replaced by the VLRs. Those are abandoned tanks and no longer used on site. One of the goals was to look at the capacity of the plant. The IDNR provides a rating of the facility that dates back to, I think, 1997 when the VLR system was implemented. The average dry weather flow in the IDNR capacity is 6 MGD. The wet weather flow is up to 10. That would be like a peak day type flow sustained for any given day. The maximum wet weather flow, which would be like a peak instantaneous or a peak hourly flow, is 12.5 MGD. And then we look at the organic strength. We look at the strength of the wastewater and the loading that the facility can treat. The design BOD loading or biochemical oxygen demand load is 11,600 pounds per day. BOD is the organic strength of the wastewater, and at 10 MGD, that relates to about a concentration of 139 milligrams per liter. The design TKN load, the TKN is the organic nitrogen and ammonia concentration in the wastewater. That design load is 2,247 pounds per day. So these are the numbers that are in the permit, that are in what's called Schedule G of the DNR, basically records for the plant. And basically when you start bumping up against these capacities, they start to want you to look at expanding your plant or providing additional capacity so that you can provide reliable operations through a variety of conditions. When we looked at existing flows and loads, this was 2 years ago and prior, we were looking at average daily flows of about 4.7 MGD, max months up to about 9.8. So running at that maximum daily value almost for 30 days straight. That would be a peak wet weather event like we've had recently. Peak day of 12.5, which is right in line with what the capacity is rated at. The BOD, the annual average for that year, that time frame that we were looking at the time, was about 6,000 pounds. The max month or 30-day continuous running average was about 9,400, and the peak day was 15,000. So compare that to the rated capacity in the DNR permit, especially looking at max month. That's how we look at capacity, is based on the max month condition. And you've got about 2,200 pounds per day of BOD capacity at a max month condition. So that's one piece of information here. And what we're trying to do is that accurate, or can that be increased to be able to attract a new industry or provide more growth for the community? On the solids perspective, these numbers are just measurements and from the plant data. There's no capacity related to solids, but it's something we have to keep in mind as we look at how the plant operates from a solids perspective. From a TKN perspective, the max month was about 1,260 pounds per day from the data set, and the capacity is 2,200. So it's about 990 pounds, almost 1,000 pounds per day of capacity remaining there. So that's kind of where we were. And then we wanted to look at what can we do at the plant to maybe expand that capacity. Like I said, are there small things or operational changes that we can make that would unlock or free up some capacity? And so we went through this approach. We look at the current effluent permit limit. First thing we always do, work backwards from the discharge up through the plant. What do you need to meet water quality standards from DNR? Next, we look at each unit process. So we talk about this process flow diagram. We look at each one and its capacity in relation to IDNR design standards. Then we look at performance and operation of those, and are they basically performing in a way that we would anticipate for a well-run plant with good equipment. And then we look at plant process models. So we model this facility basically in a kind of a complex process model that links all these processes together, interacts with them, and gives us some real key information on where that capacity really lies. And then we identify any limiting unit processes and identify some potential remedies. So it's really looking at the end and then looking at each individual interrelated process within the plant, trying to identify the bottlenecks and figuring out if there's anything within the plant that we can free up and make not a bottleneck anymore to free up capacity. So when we look at the beginning, we look at the current permit limits, and this is a very standard, this is right out of the permit that you had at the time. The permit has since changed, and I'm going to talk through that a little bit here in a bit. But at the time, when we were doing the capacity evaluation, this was the permit limits, and they're very standard water quality standards for secondary treatment, wastewater treatment plant. Requires certain percent removals, 85% removals of BOD and total suspended solids. And obviously you have to meet average, monthly limits. So 25 milligrams per liter for CBOD, 30 milligrams per liter for TSS. All of this is very standard in the wastewater industry. Every treatment plant of a certain size needs to meet similar standards within the state of Iowa. What we did notice, though, is that there are no effluent ammonia limits in your permit, or there weren't any at the time. And this is key because the amount of the way that your permit is stated, if you have ammonia limits based on water quality standards, it might force you into a certain mode of operation called nitrification at your treatment plant. And this is very common in Iowa. Ammonia limits are in your permit because it's a water quality standard that's based on toxicity. Basically, it's there to protect the health of fish and other wildlife. And so based on the size of your receiving stream, in this case, the Des Moines River, you might get a certain limit. Other plants or other facilities with smaller receiving streams will have lower ammonia limits, and plants that discharge to large receiving streams like the Missouri River or the Mississippi River may not have any ammonia limits because they're getting the credit of the dilution that occurs in the river. It's a water quality standard driven by what happens out in the river. But Ottumwa is a little unique. For its size, they get the benefit of having what's called an effluent diffuser. And that diffuser basically discharges the effluent of the wastewater plant combined with the JBS flow across the river in a pipe with holes in it that basically evenly distribute the effluent of the plant across the length or across the width of the river. That improves dilution, and that improves your ammonia limit to the point where at the time you didn't have an ammonia limit at all. So that was a good thing, and that was something we thought we could look at as far as increasing capacity. The vertical loop reactor, this is part of our evaluation process. Everything at the plant was performing really well. I mean, and has, and the staff should be commended for running a really well-run plant and maintaining water quality and effluent standards. The green dots here are effluent suspended solids. If you remember, the limit is 30. So we have a few daily excursions there, but the 30-day averages are well within that limit. The red is the effluent CBOD. If you remember, the limit was 25, and again, very single digits, less than 5 typically in effluent CBOD. Really good effluent quality. Solids retention time is something we're going to talk about. It's basically the amount of time in days that the bacteria and the organisms, basically the biology, is in the tanks, is in the VLR, how long we allow them to grow before we waste them out. They will continue to grow and die and become, basically wasted material eventually. So we basically keep them in there for a certain age frame. And so it may range from, 2 days up to 30 days. And the green line here, which is the sludge age or the solids retention time, and the scale for this is on your right, you can see that the sludge ages or the solids retention time is anywhere between 12 days early in the monitoring period, and then up to 30 days towards the right. The mixed liquor is the concentration of the biomass inside the reactors, and that's in milligrams per liter. And that's the red line that kind of jogs up and down. And these are the two things that we control at the treatment plant to perform to ammonia removal, to make good settling sludge that settles out in the final clarifiers and allows us to meet the effluent permit limit. Ammonia removal at the plant has been really good throughout its history, and you can see that the incoming TKN or incoming ammonia into the plant ranges from 10 to 40 or 50 milligrams per liter, and that's shown in the red with the black dots, or red dots with the black line. And then the effluent basically being discharged to the river is the green line, and you can see that that's almost always near zero. Almost non-detect by our sampling methods, and that shows that the plant was achieving a really good level of nitrification and ammonia removal. But if you remember, the permit didn't require ammonia removal, and so there's a little bit of a disconnect there. Typically, plants that don't need to do ammonia removal wouldn't do it voluntarily, but I think, based on history, this is where the plant was started up. This is the way it's been operated. There was a comfort level at the plant in operating it this way, and old habits die hard, and it just ran well, and it's never had a violation, and so no reason to change it. However, as we were tasked with coming up with ways to, look at capacity, we obviously have to look at should that practice continue? Should the plant continue to nitrify, its wastewater and not discharge any ammonia to the river when they don't have to? And so that's what we looked at in our process modeling. We looked at the capacity of the VLR system with nitrification, with ammonia removal in basically the current mode. And then we looked at the plant capacity without nitrification and not having ammonia removal, which wasn't required by your permit. So we looked at the plant model, and then the impact of capacity. We looked at downstream solids handling impacts. So these things are holistic. You make one change in one process, it's going to impact the adjacent process or a downstream process. So we have to kind of look at things together. And then we looked at capacity of all that, and then we kind of backed into a plant rating capacity that reflects the primary clarifiers and so forth after that. So the impacts of nitrification are somewhat unique. And so as a wastewater engineer, we typically see plants operating in the far right side of this graph. So this is your solids retention time. This is how old the bugs are in the tank. 10 days and greater is typically what we see. This is where we get good nitrification. This is effluent ammonia leaving the plant. So to get good nitrification, you have to be beyond that 10-day solids retention time. This is where we see most plants in Iowa operate unless they're on the Missouri or Mississippi River. And so that's pretty common. And that's where the plant had typically been operated. But without the ammonia limits, and if you wanted to look at not nitrifying, you have to keep this SRT or the solids retention time below 2 days or below 3 days. This area in here in between is an area of unstable operation. The bugs don't know what to do. They don't know if they are nitrifying or if they're not. And your operation can be compromised, it can be unreliable, it can be hard to manage, and it can cause problems with settleability and meeting your effluent limit. So what we recommend is that plants stay far right of the 10-day limit or far left of the 3-day limit. And so when we look at the capacity in those two scenarios, that's what we did, is we looked at those two conditions. And when we do that, we basically come up with a rating curve that looks at, based on a 12-day SRT, there's a certain capacity of about 5,100 pounds per day. And when we look at the 3-day or 2.5-day SRT, that capacity of the VLR system goes up dramatically, up to about 18,600 pounds per day. And this all relates to how the treatment process works in conjunction with the clarifiers and so forth. But this rating curve basically takes into account all the design standards that DNR would require. And so as long as we stay within this curve, we'll be meeting their requirements. So the outcome of our study was basically this table, and follow me here on the far right or far left. We've got the rated capacity at the top is 11,600. The current loadings, we went through that already. They were within that rated capacity, but starting to bump up against it. With nitrification, operating it as is and operating on the far right side, of that graph, we were saying that the VLR system had a capacity of about 5,200 pounds per day. And when you back that into a plant capacity, it's 7,400. So actually less than what the plant was rated for initially. So that was a little bit concerning. But then when we looked at the not nitrifying case down in the bottom 2 rows, that jumped up to 17,000 pounds per day to the VLR and almost over 24,000 pounds per day to the plant. So a significant increase. And so this is one of the things that we thought we should bring to light to the city. Hey, you have extra capacity here if you just change your operation from a nitrifying mode to a not nitrifying mode. Okay, and that was back late 2017 when we presented these results to the city. Between that point and actually trying to start to do some things at the plant to start to shift that mode and actually try some things out, the city received their new draft NPDES permit. And so this complicated matters because in the draft permit, it actually was requiring nitrification. The IDNR was not giving the city or the facility its due credit for the dilution based on what we expected it to receive. And so because of that lack of dilution and the way they were calculating it, basically it was driving the facility into nitrifying. And so working with the city or the plant staff and working with Larry, we did several things to kind of combat this. We actually did a dye test in the river to verify the performance of the diffuser. And Larry had some legal advice to basically argue a case with DNR. The results of that, well, here were the draft permanent limits. So instead of having none, now you have limits, if you see here on this column, now you have limits of, around 8 to 9 milligrams per liter in the middle of summer. And that would have drove, the plant to nitrify or have to nitrify most of the year. I mean, you could have maybe gotten out of doing it in the wintertime, but you would have to do something most likely in the summer. And so, just to keep things steady and operating well, you would just nitrify all the time. So these were the draft permits that DNR submitted in early before we kind of argued our case. The final result or the final ammonia limits that were agreed upon between the city and the DNR are shown in this table. So through the testing of the diffuser and the modeling of the river and then the legal assistance, we were successful in negotiating higher limits that were up to 32 milligrams per liter in September and all the way up to 191 in May, which is great. These limits will likely keep you out of nitrifying year-round, and to the benefit of the city because that frees up capacity. So we wanted, now that we kind of had the free and clear from DNR and we had new draft permit limits, we wanted to try it at full scale at the facility, make these changes in the operation of the facility and see how it goes. And so we underwent a pilot study where we worked with plant staff, we worked with Phil to basically start reducing the solids retention time so that we would get out of that zone of nitrification and we would just do a BOD only treatment. It took a long time. It took about a summer to basically slowly change the operation at the plant. But overall, we ended up getting there and it's been operating there ever since. The results of the study are, I'm gonna jump in here a little bit and let Phil talk. The results of the study are pretty phenomenal. This is the SRT transition from where they were operating before. If you remember, they were operating in the 20 to 30 day range before the pilot. And since then, we've been below 5 days. And so the plant's did a good job of keeping it within that tight bandwidth of 2 to 4 days. And it takes a little extra attention, but in the end, it's probably worth it. Overall, the effluent ammonia really hasn't changed all that much. The incoming ammonia was 15 to 25 milligrams per liter during the pilot test, but we're still well below 10 milligrams per liter on the effluent. So even though we've kind of shifted the operation into this BOD only, we're still getting good nitrogen removal and well within the permit limit of 90 to 190 or 40 to 190. So we're still well within the permit limit. but we've significantly reduced the operational requirements. We've taken basins offline. We've turned blowers as low as they can go. We've saved a lot of energy, and that's what Phil is going to talk about next. So the benefits: we've maintained reasonable effluent ammonia concentrations even at the lower solids retention time or sludge age. The overall aeration demand and power requirements were significantly reduced, more efficient than expected. Lower aeration requirements in the VLR and the solids contact tanks, which is good. Only 2 VLRs were needed. Prior to this study, we were operating 4 VLRs at all times, all year round, and we've cut that in half, and we're only operating 2 since the pilot started. And that has generated, that's less staff, that's less energy. Mostly it's energy. And it's also capacity. By not using half your tankage, you've freed up a lot of organic capacity at the plant. The next steps are to continue in this mode. There's really no desire at this point to go back. There are some miscellaneous minor troubleshooting things that we need to keep an eye on, and Phil is well aware of those, and so is staff. I met with them earlier this afternoon, and everybody seems to be on the same page and moving forward like this is the way to go. We're going to confirm the BOV capacity achieved. We have to maybe circle back and polish our models off and update them with new flows and loads, but we're anticipating similar results as we got the first time. Nutrients are on the horizon, so we need to be aware that DNR has asked the city to look at doing a nutrient reduction study. However, the schedule for that is likely beyond the CSO long-term control plan or ever. So we'll just take that day by day. But you need to have the context that's maybe out there a ways. And then maybe look into a formal re-rating of the plant based on confirmed capacity. And what I mean by that is getting the capacity reflected in our study and in our pilot, getting IDNR to reflect that in your permit so that you can go and use that capacity to attract future industries and promote growth. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil.
Thanks, Brian. All right, I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation here on the results of the process change. And there's 4 main issues I'm going to bring up. That's sludge hauling, the water quality of our effluent, and then the energy efficiency and cost savings that we've realized so far. And then, what the next steps are from here. The first thing I want to look at is sludge hauling. And one of the concerns was that we might have a slight increase in the amount of sludge we're producing, because with the lower retention time, you're cycling through your bugs faster, and we thought we'd produce more. Some people thought we produced a lot more, but looking back, the change has been 0. It's the same amount of sludge before as it was after. In case you can't read it, the orange is the old process, and the blue is the new process. But when you look into it a little bit farther, we're actually producing 2,200 fewer gallons of sludge per day that we're having to haul away. And the reason for that is we're getting really high solids concentrations in our sludge. Once it meets the sour test, we can haul it away. And it's a result of having better settling sludge. And I think the operators are getting used to the way this sludge behaves versus older sludge. And so it's, saved us $20,000 in hauling costs in the past year. We're having not a lower amount of sludge, but a higher solids content in the liquid sludge that we're hauling. Next, I want to touch on water quality a little bit. We don't have nutrient removal requirements yet. There's a nutrient removal strategy for the state. We don't have any requirements yet. So I wanted to give a little bit of background on just what our baseline removal rates are on the old process versus the new. And both the phosphorus and nitrogen removal that's just rounding errors. It's the same. And that's just basically the bugs in there are being wasted into the sludge tanks, and that's being removed from the waste flow, and they're not going to the river. And the amount being removed is the same now as it was before. So both those numbers are equal. And then he touched on the ammonia as well. We have different limits for every month, like Brian showed. And the highest recorded ammonia concentrations we have for a day and for a month, which are the 2 criteria they have for our ammonia limits now, are both like about half of our lowest months limits. So September, October timeframe, our daily and monthly averages are half of that, even on the worst month. So even if they somehow coincided to be the same month, it would still not anywhere close to what the ammonia limits are. Some more water quality data here. You can't compare point to point here. This is just the 13 months since the process change versus the months before. There's a nominal difference in the BOD effluent concentrations, but that red line way up on top, that's twice as high as the highest concentration we've had. That's what the DNR says is quality effluent. So we're nowhere near where the DNR limits us at. And same thing with suspended solids. It's less than a third of what the DNR says is a good quality effluent. So there's no chance of violations anywhere there either. Now a little bit in the cost savings. So the blue line on top, again, that's the new process, and the orange is the old process. This is comparing how many gallons we can treat for every kilowatt hour of electricity the plant uses. And I separated it out by different flow rates because there's a direct relationship. When you have higher flow rates, your base load is being spread over more gallons, but there's a definite relationship, and it's a really strong relationship. But the before and after, again, orange is the old process, blue is the new. We can treat probably 100 more gallons for each kilowatt hour of electricity we use under the new process versus the old. And that relationship holds as well when you compare it to the amount of BOD coming into the plant. The more BOD you have, the more air you have to use. And so there's a relationship there as well. And again, the new process, we can treat more pounds of BOD for every unit of electricity we use versus the old process. Now, when you take these two things and combine them together, like if you look at the raw data, it only says we're reducing our electric use by 7%, but we have 60% higher inflows than we had for the 13 months prior to the process change. And we've had 5% higher BOD loading. So we're losing less electricity, even though we're treating 60% more gallons of water. So I took those two previous graphs you saw, and I corrected our actual electricity usage versus what it would have been under each process for the amount of gallons we had coming in. And so you get a 16% reduction in electric use at the plant versus for the new process versus the old one. And this translates into 1,600 fewer kilowatt hours per day and 590,000 fewer kilowatt hours per year. And this has just been in the past year. That equates to about $44,000 a year in electric savings we've had at the plant. And then I got some kind of fun facts here. So these are using conversion factors from the EPA and the Department of Energy. It would have taken us an 18,500 square foot solar array at a cost of $800,000 to reduce our electric bill by the amount we've reduced it just by doing this process change. And we've also prevented 900,000 pounds of CO2 from being emitted in the last year. And that offsets the emissions from 47,000 gallons of fuel. And that's about 76% of the fuel use of the city. And that includes like all the police and the fire, Ottumwa Housing Authority. So that's quite a big environmental difference there. And I wanted to show you this slide specifically because of what I got circled down here. And that's the electricity we used. I skipped a slide there. Hold on. Okay, here we go. First of all, where to from here? So we can look to ways to reduce the cost of aeration even more. We have turned the blowers down as far as they'll go, and we've turned off all but two of our rotors, which stir up the top of the VLRs and introduce air and produce movement there. So we have to have at least one run in each cell to produce the circulation that the VLRs require. We've turned all those off we can. We've turned the air down as far as it'll go, and we still have more oxygen than necessary in the plant because the loadings have gone down so much since Dr. Pepper put pretreatment in that we just can't go down any farther. So we've saved a lot of money there on air, but there's additional savings to be had, but it would take significant capital expense to do that. We'd have to get DO meters and then actuated valves, and we have to resize our blowers, which is a lot of money. And we're going to look into that and see if it's worth the capital cost. But it's an area for additional savings. And then something else we've been doing just in the past few months is reducing our recirculation rates. So When we had 60,000 pounds of bugs circulating through the VLRs, now we have about 20,000. And so you don't need to pump as many gallons from the final clarifiers back into the VLRs to get those bugs circulated back in. So we've been able to reduce our recirculation rates from 57% of the inflow to 39%. And so far, we have no sludge buildup in the final clarifiers, so there's still room to go even lower on that. And that's a huge cost savings, which is reflected in the next slide I was going to show you here. That 7,300 kilowatt hours per day was what we used last month. And it's like 20% lower than any month we've ever had under the old process. And that's a combination of finally getting down to where we have a normal flow rate. It's been so high for so long that it was masked in the old daily usages. And also this recirculation rate that we've only been doing for a few months is still in the process of going lower and lower. So, maybe in a year's time, we'll have a new line down there, on a different level than everything else, which would be pretty exciting, I think. And just in summary, so we're continuing to produce high quality effluent from the plant. Our savings versus the previous process were $64,000 in the last year. That's 7,200 pounds per day. So we're averaging about 4,500 pounds at the headworks. And to come up with the max monthly number, you add a 60% onto that, you multiply it by 1.6. That's what the DNR uses to get your plant to rate your plant at, or what it thinks is coming into there. So 7,200 pounds is our max month rating since Dr. Pepper started pre-treatment, which is a lot lower than what it was before. We currently have 11,613 rated at the plant right now, and there's the ability to re-rate it to 24.3 like Brian mentioned earlier. But we probably won't do that unless there's a reason to, because Larry could go farther into this than me, but there's regulatory issues. If you re-rate the plant, you bring in the DNR to look at everything from the raindrop to the river, and unless it's necessary, you probably don't want to go through the hassle but it's there. The capacity is there. Anyway, if there's any questions for Brian or myself.
Is there any questions or comments? I want to personally thank all of you for the work you've done, Larry, Phil, and Brian, because this is something that not only saves taxpayer dollars and runs a plant just as efficient as we have before, but it sets the stage for us knowing what we have. And, several years ago, we really didn't know, running the numbers, we were, full capacity. So now we know we've got room, and I appreciate that. That's a big thing, big step for us moving forward to know. So thank you for all your hard work and getting the presentations to us. Appreciate it. Is there any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, moving on down to public hearings.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the proposed revocation of an easement and the demolition of a storage unit adjacent to city-owned property located at 203 East Main, 116 South Market in Ottumwa, Iowa.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing. And who's going to take this? Joni?
I guess I am, Your
Okay.
Honor. This is a little unusual situation. City acquired 203 East Main, 116 South Market through a 657A process. And we will be very shortly accepting bids on this building for sale. But there is an existing easement on the property that allowed the former owner to put a small cooking shack, storage shed on property owned by the Gettings family. The Gettings family has asked, since it's no longer being used, that we voluntarily revoke the easement, and the Gettingses will demolish that building, and they'll resume usage of their property. I don't have the revocation document from their attorney yet, but hopefully I'll get that this week and present it. But I'd like authorization for the mayor pro tem to sign it as soon as we do receive it, and we'll get it recorded.
Okay, this is a public hearing. If there's anybody in the audience that wants to address this item, now's your time to come forward. Okay, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris?
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Resolution number 225, 2019, approving the revocation of an easement for a storage unit adjacent to city-owned property located at 203 East Main, 116 South Market in Ottumwa, Iowa. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 225, 2019.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Okay, are there any questions on this item from the council? Okay, Chris, please take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the Water Pollution Control Facility Gatewell Conversion Project.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing. Phil, you have the floor.
Thank you. This project, so a little bit of background, there are roughly 3 foot by 5 interceptor sewers underneath Jefferson and Market Street. And in years past, there used to be they used to run directly to the river through flap gates, the north side interceptor. Those gates have been shut for years and years and aren't used any longer. We've done sewer separation, so we no longer need the extra capacity on the north side interceptor. And so this project gets to remove those flap gates, concrete the hole shut, and convert those gate wells into manholes to access the north side interceptor.
Okay, this is a public hearing. If there's anybody that wants to address this item on the agenda, please step forward now. Okay, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris?
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Resolution number 235, 2019, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the Water Pollution Control Facility Gatewell Conversion Project. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 235, 2019.
And is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, any questions, Phil? Okay, Chris, please take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Resolution number 227, 2019, authorizing Mayor Pro Tem Matt Dalby to sign an agreement with Mulder and Associates Midwest Municipal Consulting, a search firm, to assist in the recruitment and hiring of a city administrator. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 227, 2019.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Okay, and in the crowd tonight is Mr. Bill Mulder himself. And at this time, I'd ask him to come and give a quick presentation about his firm. It's good to have you with us tonight. It's nice to see this process moving forward. And you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. We really appreciate the opportunity, this business opportunity to work with the city in searching for a new city administrator. It's one of the more important positions in city government, staff positions in city government, and as you well know, part of our process, I should have introduced us both before I started here. I was thinking more about telling you what we're going to do than who we are. My name is Bill Mulder, and you have in the packet my resume and Elizabeth Hanson, who is the other consulting firm that we're partnering with, has been in the business for a while. She's been in city government in Iowa for a number of years. Would you like to say anything about it?
Sure. Hello again, Elizabeth Hanson, Midwest Municipal Consulting. I've been working with Mulder and Associates for probably at least pretty close to 10 years now on different searches. So again, we probably have a pretty impressive bio in your packet. We just wanted to come and thank you for this opportunity and in consideration to work with you on your next search.
Where I was starting to go, one of the really important aspects of doing a search process is for us to clearly understand what the needs are, the council's need, the city need in this position. To help us understand what that is, we will be doing a lot of interviewing of people. We'll interview anybody that will talk to us. We'll especially focus on council members, the city staff, and seek out any public input that we can get to help us understand what the needs are for the next city administrator. We'll start doing that this week. How far we get along this week, we'll see, but we'll be a constant presence around here for a while in trying to find out what your needs were going to be and what your expectations are in the next city administrator. The information we gather here not only guides the selection process, it guides our advertising and our initial candidate selection. We will be winnowing the field down so that you don't have to deal with a large handful of candidates. You'll only deal with the top quality candidates that survive the process. So we look forward to meeting with you one-on-one individually. If we can see you in person, that'll be great. Otherwise, we'll try and interview you with telephone conversations and probably have follow-up questions afterwards. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and we're looking forward to getting started.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. Mulder? Well, thank you both for coming again. We look forward to working with you. Thanks again. Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Chris, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Resolution number 228, 2019, accepting change order number 1 for the Airport Runway 1331 Runway Reconstruction Project, providing for the instrument landing system at the Ottumwa Regional Airport. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 228, 2019.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, and is there anybody to present on this? Joni? All right, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you know, we're in the middle of the reconstruction of the runway out at the airport. Part of that project involved the new lighting system that the FAA will be putting in. At the time we initially bid this project, the FAA had not provided to us their plans and specs for the runway lighting system. And at this point, they've now completed that, and we are asking that there be a change order for that lighting system. We initially budgeted about $20,000 in contingency for this part of the project, but the FAA's plans went up a little higher to about $423,000. The good news is the FAA is paying 90% and we're paying 10%. So we're going to need to come up with $42,326,000 or $2,600 for our portion of this project. And this would be the change order, and hopefully will be the final change order that you'll see on this project. It's getting very close to completion.
Okay, and any questions on this? It's obviously going to be a little bit more money, but something we're kind of already involved with. So there's no questions. Chris, please take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Resolution number 231, 2019, approving change order number 1 and accepting the apron improvement project at the Ottumwa Regional Airport as complete and authorizing final payment to the contractor. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 231, 2019.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Okay, Joni?
As part of this project, we also received a grant from the IDOT for the apron, a portion of the apron reconstruction project. And we were able to get a good bid from Manats, who did the reconstruction portion. And so with the change order, we have some quantity adjustments that increases the final project cost by $7,708 for the final approval of this project at $286,150. And we'd request approval of this change order and final payment.
Okay, any questions for this item? Okay, seeing none, Chris, go ahead and take the roll, please.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Resolution number 232, 2019, accepting the work as final and complete for the beach renovations Phase 3 project 2018, Contract A, and approving the final payment to RG Construction in the amount of $10,773.45. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 232, 2019.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Okay, Parks Director Gene Rashi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. This project consisted of separate contracts to address required renovations at the beach at Ottumwa, located at 101 Church Street. They involved concrete repairs consisting of replacement of concrete decking and sidewalk around the wave pool, including concrete demolition and horizontal concrete placement. RG Construction of Ottumwa has completed the above referenced work according to the plans and specifications. This will authorize final payment and release all retainage in the amount of $10,773.45. And the total Phase 3 costs to date are $505,155.30.
Okay, any questions or comments for Gene about this project? Okay, Chris, please take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes. Thank you, Gene.
Ordinance number 3168, 2019, amending Chapter 25 entitled Public Offenses of the Municipal Code of Ordinances for the City of Ottumwa, Iowa, and redefining disorderly conduct as a city offense. Recommendation passed the first consideration of ordinance number 3168, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'll bet, Joan, you're taking this one.
I guess I am. Thank you, Your Honor. Recent U.S. District Court case ruled that the Iowa Code Section 723.4 subparagraph 2 was unconstitutional, as it was insufficient to notify the public as to what all cities and counties not work with this particular code section. But the judge did leave us an opening that we could amend our ordinance, which is patterned after state law, to describe what intent would be required for disorderly conduct charge to be filed against a defendant. So I went ahead and made some changes to our local ordinance, and I believe it is in compliance with constitutional requirements, and would request that the council approve the first consideration and then waive the second and third readings so we can get that on the book and be able to utilize our ordinance on disorderly conduct.
Okay, any questions for Joni on that? Pretty interesting. Okay, Chris, take the roll on recommendation A.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Waive the second and third consideration, pass and adopt ordinance number 3168, 2019.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Chris, take the roll, please.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes. Okay, we're down to the point of a public forum. This is the time and opportunity where people can come and address things that are not on the agenda for any reason whatsoever. If there's anybody wanting to do that, now's the time to step forward, please. And seeing none, we'll move on down to petitions and communications, a spot I missed last time.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a couple of things I want to bring to the council's attention. I want to remind everybody, city staff and council and the public, our comp planning is coming to a conclusion, and we will have a meeting, excuse me, November 14th at 5:30 at Bridgeview Center. The public is invited, and we would like to have as much input on that so we can complete that process. Secondly, we have completed sending all the paperwork for the quiet zone process. Hopefully, we'll get a letter from the Federal Railway Administration sometime the end of the month or the 1st of November, and we will celebrate when we have a quiet zone designation. Thirdly, there is a forum scheduled for Thursday night this week, the 17th, here in City Chambers for the council positions. And I'll also remind there will be a forum for school board members on the 24th, and that will be at Evans Middle School. And the first time that we will have a joint election of school board and city council. And lastly, I'd like to recognize Christy McDowell, who is sitting at the end of the table. Christy, as you know, agreed to step in and help us in the after the retirement of Bob Jay. And Christy has broken in several people in the finance department, and I've really enjoyed getting to work with her. She's a great addition to the city and will do a fine job for us. So thank you, Christy, for being here tonight. With that, Your Honor, that's all I have.
Okay, anybody else on the council have any good and welfare for the public tonight? Nobody? Okay, we'll move on then, and I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Chris?
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes, 6:55. Have a good evening.